As we begin our journey into the story of Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire, let us settle into a slow rhythm, as though we are listening by candlelight in a quiet library. The world outside fades, and before us stretches the long corridor of time, where marble columns cast their shadows and the voices of history speak softly. Tonight, we follow one of the most iconic figures of antiquity, Gaius Julius Caesar, and the civilization that shaped him, the Roman world. By moving gently through the centuries, we will not only uncover Caesar's personal rise and fall, but also the empire that grew from his legacy, an empire whose cultural weight remains with us still. The history of Rome is immense, a span of centuries, beginning with small settlements along the Tiber River. From modest huts to imperial palaces, Rome's evolution reveals the power of ambition and organization. Julius Caesar appears in this story as both a culmination of earlier traditions and a turning point towards something new. He is remembered as a military commander of extraordinary talent, a statesman whose reforms sought to reorganize society, and perhaps most famously, a victim of betrayal. But beyond the sharp drama of his life, Caesar becomes a doorway into understanding how Rome itself transforms from republic to empire. To grasp Caesar's role, we first pause to reflect on the republic that shaped him. Rome of the Republic was a state built on balance. Senators, magistrates, and popular assemblies coexisted in a careful arrangement of shared power. Citizens valued the concept of res publica, the public thing, or the commonwealth. Over time, however, wealth disparities grew. Military leaders acquired loyal armies, and political rivalries eroded cooperation. Into this setting, Caesar was born in 100 BCE, heir to a patrician family, but raised in an age when ambition and oratory meant as much as bloodline. The young Caesar encountered Rome as a restless city, filled with grandeur, but also with tension. The streets carried the bustle of markets, with olive oil, grain, and wine traded from distant provinces. Temples to Jupiter and Venus rose above the forum, their stones gleaming in the Mediterranean light. Citizens gathered in debate, while slaves carried water and amphorae, living as the silent foundation of Roman wealth. It was into this vibrant, unequal world that Caesar learned to navigate, using eloquence, strategy, and careful alliances. As he matured, Caesar's life intersected with some of the Republic's most pressing challenges: the concentration of power among the wealthy, the expansion of Rome's territory, and the growing influence of generals who commanded the loyalty of soldiers. His military campaigns, particularly in Gaul, not only expanded Rome's borders but also elevated his own reputation. Yet fame brought rivalry, and rivalry brought civil war. Rome's streets, once the proud symbol of civic harmony, echoed with the footsteps of soldiers. Caesar's eventual dictatorship represented both innovation and peril. His reforms touched taxation, debt, and the calendar, shaping even the way we measure time. But his accumulation of power alarmed the Senate, leading to the famous Ides of March in 44 BCE, when conspirators ended his life in the theater of Pompey. His death did not restore the Republic. Instead, it set the stage for another transformation, the rise of his adopted heir Octavian, later Augustus, and with him the Roman Empire. When we listen to Caesar's story, we also listen to Rome itself, its grandeur, its contradictions, its lessons about ambition and governance. The Roman Empire, born from the ashes of the Republic, spread across 3 continents. Its roads, aqueducts, literature, and law continue to ripple through modern society. Caesar may be gone, but the echoes of his era remain in language, politics, and cultural memory. Tonight's exploration unfolds as a calm passage through this grand history. We will travel chronologically from Rome's earliest beginnings, through Caesar's rise, his reforms, and the fall that followed, and onward to the empire that emerged from his shadow. Each chapter is designed to slow the mind, like a gentle tide carrying us deeper into history's flow. Along the way, we will pause to describe daily life, what Romans ate, how they worshipped, the sights and sounds of their world, so that the story does not rest only in battles and laws, but in the living experience of a civilization. As we drift through these chapters, imagine the marble streets beneath your feet, the warmth of the Mediterranean sun, the cool shade beneath a basilica's arches. Picture the red standards of Roman legions rising over green hillsides, the murmurs of senators debating in the Curia, and the quiet scratch of styluses across wax tablets. These images, like fragments from a dream, will guide us into rest. This introduction is not a conclusion, but an opening, an invitation to follow the story step by step. In the next 9 chapters, we will carefully unfold the tale: the origins of Rome, the rise of Caesar, the dynamics of his conquests, the intrigues of his political life, the transformation of governance, and the empire that followed. Each section will be woven with reflection, allowing the mind to absorb knowledge even as it prepares for sleep. So let us begin. Close your eyes, slow your breathing, and imagine time itself as a long corridor. At its entrance stands the figure of Julius Caesar, surrounded by the Roman world. His story and the empire it shaped now open before us, ready to be told in the quiet hours of the night. The story of Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire begins long before his birth, in the dim and distant centuries when Rome was only a cluster of huts upon the hills beside the river Tiber. To understand Caesar's world, we must first understand the origins of Rome itself, for the soil that nourished his ambition was rich with earlier traditions, myths, and conflicts. As we drift back to these earliest days, let us imagine the landscape of central Italy: rolling hills covered with oaks, vineyards cultivated by hand, and shepherds guiding their flocks across valleys where the Tiber's waters flow steadily to the sea. The Roman tradition preserves a legendary beginning. According to myth, the city was founded in 753 BCE by Romulus, a descendant of the Trojan hero Aeneas. Raised by a she-wolf with his twin brother Remus, Romulus grew into the first king of Rome. Myths such as this were not simple stories, but guiding lights for Roman identity, giving meaning to the city's destiny. The tale of Rome's birth in blood, Romulus killing Remus, taught Romans that strength, discipline, and order were essential to survival. Whether legend or fact, the myth whispered a lesson about Rome's self-image, a people destined for greatness, born of hardship and guided by the gods. Archaeology, too, offers evidence of early Rome. Excavations on the Palatine Hill reveal post holes from wooden huts dating to the 8th century BCE. These structures, modest in size, hint at the community of shepherds and farmers who began to gather there. Gradually, villages coalesced into a single settlement, united by shared rituals at sacred sites. The Forum, which would later become the bustling political heart of Rome, began as a marshland drained to provide common ground. What was once muddy earth became the center of Roman civic life. Rome's location provided advantages that explain its eventual prominence. The Tiber River allowed access to the sea, yet the city lay inland, protected from sudden raids by pirates. Fertile plains supported agriculture, while surrounding hills offered natural defenses. Italy's central position in the Mediterranean ensured contact with Etruscans to the north and Greek colonists to the south. This mixture of influences, Etruscan kingship, Greek art and letters, and Latin traditions, formed the early character of Rome. In its earliest centuries, Rome was ruled by kings, some legendary and others historical. Among them was Tarquinius Superbus, the last monarch, whose tyranny inspired revolt. In 509 BCE, the Romans expelled their king and declared that never again would one man rule unchecked. Thus was born the Roman Republic, a new form of government rooted in collective decision-making. The memory of kingship lingered, however, shaping Roman fear of autocracy. This suspicion of concentrated power would echo in the debates surrounding Julius Caesar many centuries later. Life in early Rome was simple, yet already infused with ritual and hierarchy. Citizens gathered for festivals honoring gods like Jupiter, Mars, and Vesta. Priests guarded sacred fires, while augurs read the flight of birds to interpret divine will. Farming remained the foundation of survival. Wheat, olives, and grapes were cultivated, while livestock provided meat and wool. Families lived in extended households known as domus, with fathers holding authority as paterfamilias. Even here, we see the roots of Roman values: discipline, respect for tradition, and devotion to the household and community. Yet beneath this outward order, divisions already appeared. Rome's society split between patricians, wealthy aristocratic families claiming ancient lineage, and plebeians, the broader body of common citizens. This tension would shape politics for centuries, producing both conflict and compromise. As Rome grew, so too did its institutions, balancing voices while preserving patrician dominance. The Senate, composed of elite men, advised the magistrates. Assemblies allowed citizens to vote, though wealth heavily influenced results. Out of this structure emerged a culture of debate and oratory, where persuasion became as important as the sword. The Republic, still young, faced constant tests. Neighboring peoples challenged Roman strength, from the Latins and Sabines to the powerful Etruscans. Through alliances, warfare, and diplomacy, Rome gradually secured its place in central Italy. By the 4th century BCE, it began to expand further, clashing with the Samnites and eventually the great city of Carthage. Each victory brought new lands, new peoples, and new responsibilities. Rome's legions, citizen soldiers who fought with discipline and endurance, became the backbone of expansion. The ideal of the farmer soldier, tilling his land in peace and marching to war in defense, remained a cherished image, even as reality grew more complex. It is in this expanding, restless republic that we find the earliest foundations for Caesar's age. The balance of institutions, the reverence for tradition, and the reliance on military strength all trace back to these origins. By the time Caesar entered the world, Rome had grown from a collection of huts into a dominant power, yet the strains of inequality and ambition already cracked its foundations. The story of origins is not merely background, it is the soil out of which Caesar's destiny grows. As we reflect upon Rome's beginnings, we notice how myth and history intertwine. The story of a wolf raising twins blends with the archaeological remains of huts. The king's tales merge with the records of early institutions. Rome's people, in shaping their past, also shaped their future, using narrative to justify their power and guide their ambitions. In this way, Rome's origins remind us that history is not only the record of events, but the memory of meaning. And so, as we drift forward from these earliest days, we carry with us the quiet knowledge that Caesar's world is already foreshadowed. His rise will not be an accident, but the continuation of Rome's restless search for order and greatness. The city that began as a shepherd's village beside the Tiber is already destined to become the heart of an empire, and Caesar will stand at the threshold of that transformation. The early republic emerges from the shadows of kingship as a bold experiment in governance, a system designed to prevent tyranny while preserving stability. To understand Julius Caesar's later struggles with the Senate and the people, we must pause here and examine how Rome's republican foundations took shape. Imagine for a moment the Roman Forum in the 5th century BCE, citizens gathering under the open sky, magistrates seated upon curule chairs, and laws being proclaimed not within a palace, but in the presence of the community. It is here that the Republic becomes both an idea and a lived reality. When Tarquinius Superbus, the last king, was overthrown in 509 BCE, the Romans established new institutions to divide power. Instead of one monarch, Rome would now be guided by 2 consuls, elected annually. These consuls held the authority of command, yet each could veto the other, ensuring no single man dominated. This principle of checks and balances, later admired by modern governments, was Rome's answer to the fear of autocracy. Surrounding the consuls stood other magistrates, praetors to oversee law, quaestors to manage finances, and censors to supervise public morality and census rolls. At the heart of decision-making, however, remained the Senate, a body of elder statesmen whose advice carried immense weight. Rome's citizens also gathered in assemblies, exercising their right to vote. Though suffrage extended broadly, votes were weighted by wealth and military class, favoring the patrician elite. Still, the act of citizen participation, even if uneven, gave the Republic its sense of shared ownership. The Latin phrase res publica, the public thing, reflected this ideal. Rome belonged to all, not to a monarch. In reality, however, political life was dominated by aristocratic families whose lineage, connections, and wealth ensured influence. The tension between patricians and plebeians, between elite and commoner, soon became the central drama of early Roman politics. Plebeians resented exclusion from the highest offices and the unfair weight of debt and taxation. Their struggle, known as the conflict of the orders, spanned nearly 2 centuries. Through protest and negotiation, plebeians gained new rights. In 494 BCE, they secured the office of tribune, whose sacred duty was to protect the people, and whose power of veto could halt any official action deemed harmful. Later, plebeians gained access to consulships, the codification of laws in the 12 tables, and eventually the ability to intermarry with patricians. Each step widened participation, making the Republic more inclusive, though inequality persisted. The 12 tables, inscribed around 450 BCE, are especially significant. displayed in the Forum for all to see. They provided transparency and predictability. They codified practices of inheritance, property, and punishment, ensuring that the law was not simply the privilege of the elite, but a shared framework. This act of inscribing law publicly gave Romans a sense of stability, reinforcing the belief that their society rested on rules, not whims. Rome's republican structure also depended on military service. Citizens were organized into centuries based on wealth, each responsible for providing arms and armor. Wealthier citizens, able to afford horses, formed the cavalry, while poorer citizens fought as infantry. This close tie between citizenship and military obligation instilled discipline and patriotism. To be Roman was to serve, both in civic debate and on the battlefield. The Republic, then, was not merely a set of laws, but a lived contract of duty between individual and state. As Rome expanded its influence across Italy, these institutions were tested. The city formed alliances and extended citizenship, weaving conquered peoples into its fabric. This inclusion helped secure loyalty, yet also introduced complexity. Romans prided themselves on adaptability. Laws evolved, offices multiplied, and traditions adjusted. Still, the core principle of balance remained intact. The Senate debated strategy, consuls executed decisions, and assemblies lent legitimacy. The system was not perfect, but it endured, flexible enough to absorb change. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome had grown into a formidable power. Its victories in the Punic Wars against Carthage brought new wealth, territories, and challenges. Vast estates, known as latifundia, spread across conquered lands, worked by enslaved laborers. The influx of wealth widened the gap between elite and poor. Veterans returning from war often found themselves dispossessed, while senators accumulated fortunes. These disparities strained the republican system, testing the ideals of balance and fairness. The seeds of later turmoil, including the rise of powerful generals, were already being sown. Culturally, the Republic was vibrant. Contact with Greece infused Roman society with art, philosophy, and literature. Romans adopted Greek gods under new names, blending traditions. Architecture advanced, with temples and basilicas rising to frame the Forum. Public rituals reinforced unity, from triumphal processions celebrating generals to festivals honoring deities. At the same time, ordinary Romans continued daily rhythms of farming, trade, and family life. Their voices, though less recorded than those of senators, gave the Republic its heartbeat. As we reflect upon this early republic, we see the paradox at its core. It promised shared governance, yet privileged the wealthy. It celebrated law, yet tolerated inequality. It demanded civic duty, yet rewarded personal ambition. These contradictions would grow sharper over time, setting the stage for figures like Julius Caesar. His eventual challenge to the Senate cannot be understood without this background. A system designed to prevent kingship, yet vulnerable to the rise of extraordinary individuals. For now, though, we pause in this period of balance. The Republic stands proud, its citizens devoted to tradition, its institutions admired. The Forum hums with debate, the legions march across Italy, and Rome looks outward, ever expanding. Yet beneath the marble and ceremony, fault lines spread quietly, unseen by those who believe their system eternal. History teaches us that even the most stable foundations can tremble, and it is upon these foundations that Caesar will one day build his career. As the night deepens, we hold this image gently in mind. The Republic in its youth, vigorous and confident, yet carrying within it the quiet seeds of change. Those seeds will, in time, bear fruit in the life of Julius Caesar, whose story unfolds as the Republic itself moves toward transformation. Julius Caesar's youth belongs to a Rome already expanding, already powerful, and yet already restless. To follow his path from child to rising statesman, we must slow our steps and picture the city as it appeared in the 1st century BCE. Narrow streets wind through crowded neighborhoods, insulae or apartment buildings rise precariously above busy markets, and noble families live within domus houses decorated with mosaics and atriums open to the sky. It is within this bustling, divided Rome that Gaius Julius Caesar was born, in July of 100 BCE. Caesar came from the Julian clan, or gens Julia, an ancient patrician family that claimed descent from Aeneas, the Trojan hero. This noble lineage gave prestige, yet by the time of Caesar's birth, the family was not among the wealthiest or most influential of Rome's aristocracy. His father, Gaius Julius Caesar the Elder, served as a praetor, a judicial official, while his mother Aurelia came from the distinguished Cotta family, known for its discipline and education. From her, Caesar inherited qualities of diligence and careful upbringing. Though patrician in name, the family's fortunes were modest, a reminder that in Rome, ancestry opened doors, but achievement sustained status. As a boy, Caesar absorbed the education expected of Rome's elite. He learned to read and write in Latin and Greek, studied rhetoric to master the art of persuasive speech, and became familiar with Rome's laws and histories. Tutors emphasized memorization, for the ability to recall laws and precedents was vital for any political career. The young Caesar, sharp of mind and ambitious of spirit, excelled in these studies. Even in his earliest years, the tools of statesmanship, language, memory, and charisma were being honed. Beyond the classroom, Rome itself offered lessons. The city was turbulent, marked by political struggles between optimates or conservative aristocrats and populares, politicians appealing to the common people. During Caesar's youth, the reformer Gaius Marius, his uncle by marriage, dominated politics with military reforms and populist policies. Marius opened the army to poorer citizens, creating legions loyal to generals rather than to the Senate. His rivalry with the patrician general Sulla plunged Rome into civil conflict. These struggles were not distant news for Caesar. They were family affairs. By blood and marriage, Caesar was tied to the Marian cause, a fact that would shape his early career and place him in danger when Sulla seized power. In 84 BCE, tragedy struck. Caesar's father died suddenly, leaving the 16-year-old as head of household. This responsibility forced him into early adulthood, balancing family duties with ambitions. Soon after, he married Cornelia, daughter of Cinna, a leading ally of Marius. This alliance strengthened his ties to the populares, but also drew suspicion from Sulla, who by then had returned victorious and assumed dictatorial control. Sulla ordered Caesar to divorce Cornelia, but the young man refused, showing a stubborn courage that foreshadowed his later defiance of authority. Stripped of his inheritance and priestly position as Flamen Dialis, Caesar went into hiding, moving cautiously from house to house until influential friends interceded on his behalf. Sulla relented, but not without warning. In the boy Caesar, he said, he saw many a Marius. Surviving these early trials, Caesar turned toward a military career. Service in Asia offered him safety from Rome's political dangers and a chance to build reputation. In 81 BCE, he distinguished himself in campaigns under the general Minucius Thermus, earning the civic crown for valor. He later traveled to Bithynia on a diplomatic mission, where his extended stay aroused gossip, but also taught him the subtleties of negotiation. These early experiences abroad widened his horizons, exposing him to cultures beyond Italy and strengthening his confidence. Upon returning to Rome, Caesar cultivated his skills as an orator and advocate. In the Forum, he prosecuted corrupt governors, winning admiration for his eloquence. His speeches, sharp yet measured, revealed his ability to sway crowds. At the same time, he lived extravagantly, borrowing heavily to fund public shows and displays of generosity. Debt weighed upon him, but in Roman politics, lavish spending was an investment in popularity. His charm, wit, and generosity won him allies among the people, even as his aristocratic peers viewed him with suspicion. Caesar's appearance and demeanor also attracted notice. Sources describe him as tall, of fair complexion, with sharp features and an intense gaze. He paid careful attention to his grooming, wearing his toga meticulously and keeping himself in the latest style. Though later in life mocked for his thinning hair, in youth he cultivated an image of refinement and elegance. This outward polish reflected inner discipline, for Caesar understood that presentation was as vital as policy in winning Roman favor. Throughout his 20s, Caesar's career advanced steadily. He served as a military tribune, then as quaestor, gaining experience in administration and further military command. Each step prepared him for higher office within the cursus honorum, the ladder of Roman political life. Alongside this rise, he maintained his alignment with the populares, championing policies that supported the common people. His generosity at games and banquets, his legal prosecutions, and his connections all deepened his reputation as a man of the people. Yet beneath these achievements lay constant danger. Rome in this period was not a peaceful republic, but a state shaken by riots, assassinations, and conspiracies. Senators schemed for advantage, Generals clashed for supremacy, and the gap between rich and poor widened relentlessly. Caesar's youth unfolded against this backdrop, preparing him to navigate turbulence with caution and courage. He learned early that survival required flexibility, boldness, and an unyielding pursuit of opportunity. As we pause at this stage of Caesar's life, we see not yet the conqueror of Gaul or the dictator of Rome, but a young man shaped by family expectations, personal courage, and political storms. The republic he grew up in was already strained by inequality and ambition. In its conflicts, Caesar discovered both peril and possibility. His refusal to bow before Sulla, his service abroad, his eloquence at home, all were signs of the determination that would later propel him to heights no Roman had reached before. In this way, Caesar's youth becomes more than a prelude. It is a mirror of Rome itself, ambitious, restless, divided, and destined for transformation. As we drift further into his story, we carry with us the image of a young noble walking through Rome's crowded streets, already dreaming of power, already prepared to seize the chances history would offer him. Caesar's path to power narrows toward the army, for in Rome the sword was often a more direct route to influence than the vote. To follow him into this chapter, let us picture the wide landscapes of Gaul, dense forests, rolling hills, and rivers cutting through fertile plains. Here, Caesar would demonstrate brilliance as a commander, securing wealth, prestige, and a loyalty that would change Rome itself. His military career becomes not only the story of battles won, but of reputation forged, a story that begins with careful preparation and ambition unmatched. By the 60s BCE, Caesar had already served in various political offices, moving through the cursus honorum, the sequence of roles expected for ambitious Romans. Yet politics and the army were inseparable, for a successful general returned home, not only with glory, but with the loyalty of legions. Caesar understood this keenly. His first great opportunity came in 59 BCE, when he was elected consul, the republic's highest office. Though constrained by the Senate, he proved shrewd, forming an informal alliance known as the First Triumvirate with Pompey the Great, a celebrated general, and Crassus, Rome's wealthiest man. Together, they balanced power and advanced their interests. Caesar secured a military command in Gaul, a province north of Italy, where he would build his legend. At that time, Gaul was a patchwork of tribes, some allied with Rome, others fiercely independent. The region stretched across what is now France, Belgium, and parts of Switzerland. Caesar's assignment, initially modest, expanded rapidly. Between 58 and 50 BCE, he led campaigns known as the Gallic Wars, chronicled in his own commentaries, De Bello Gallico. In calm, precise prose, Caesar recounted victories, portraying himself as the bringer of order to a wild land. His writings, though crafted to shape opinion, remain among the most vivid records of Roman military life. The campaigns were arduous and varied. In 58 BCE, Caesar confronted the Helvetii, a migrating tribe whose movements threatened Roman allies. He defeated them decisively, forcing their return to ancestral lands. The following year, he turned against Ariovistus, a Germanic king who had crossed the Rhine. Through skillful maneuvering, Caesar drove him back, securing Roman control. Over the years, he subdued the Belgae, fought in Brittany against the Veneti, who controlled sea routes, and even crossed into Britain, making Rome's first contact with the island. Caesar's strategies reveal his genius. He built fortifications with astonishing speed, constructed bridges across mighty rivers like the Rhine, and adapted to unfamiliar terrain. His leadership inspired loyalty, for he shared hardships with his soldiers, marching alongside them and addressing them with confidence. Generosity in rewards and fairness in discipline further bound the legions to him. By the end of his campaigns, Caesar commanded not only vast new territories, but also an army fiercely devoted to him personally. The conquest of Gaul enriched Rome, bringing spoils, slaves, and land. For Caesar, it brought fame that rivaled Pompey's. His annual reports, sent to the Senate, portrayed him as both defender of Rome and man of destiny. Yet his growing power alarmed his rivals. Senators feared that Caesar's popularity with the people and control of seasoned legions could upset the delicate balance of the republic. His alliance with Pompey and Crassus, too, began to fray. Crassus died in 53 BCE during a disastrous campaign against Parthia, and Pompey, once Caesar's ally, drifted toward the Senate's conservative faction. Even as politics in Rome turned tense, Caesar continued campaigning, ensuring his name remained ever present in the public imagination. The people admired his victories. Veterans adored his leadership. The Senate grew increasingly wary. His debts, once crushing, were erased by spoils, and his wealth allowed him to fund public games and projects that further endeared him to the masses. Each triumph added to the image of Caesar as not just a general, but a man destined to reshape Rome. Life in the camps reflected his leadership style. Soldiers endured long marches, harsh winters, and sudden battles, yet Caesar maintained morale through speeches and direct presence. He often addressed his men not as subordinates, but as comrades, a practice rare among aristocratic commanders. The bond between Caesar and his legions became legendary, a relationship built on mutual trust and shared ambition. This loyalty would prove decisive when he later defied the Senate. The Gallic Wars also reveal the harsher side of Roman conquest. Villages were destroyed, populations enslaved, and resistance crushed with severity. Caesar's victories brought Rome glory, but they came at great human cost to the tribes of Gaul. In his writings, he emphasized the necessity of Roman order over tribal disorder, yet modern readers see the immense suffering behind the triumph. These realities remind us that empire often grows not only from brilliance, but also from brutality. As Caesar's command in Gaul neared its end, his political situation sharpened. Tradition required generals to relinquish their armies before returning to Rome, but Caesar feared prosecution by his enemies in the Senate. Without his legions, he would stand vulnerable. With them, he was untouchable. The stage was set for confrontation, the Republic trembling under the weight of its own contradictions. As we drift from this chapter of campaigns, we see Caesar not only as a military leader, but as a man weaving fame, loyalty, and wealth into a net strong enough to challenge Rome itself. The fields of Gaul, scarred by battles and marked by Roman triumph, whisper of victories that would echo across centuries. Yet they also foreshadow the storm to come. For in securing Gaul, Caesar secured the power to confront the Republic and to test its survival. The tension between Caesar and the Senate deepens until it resolves in one dramatic gesture, the crossing of the Rubicon. To enter this chapter, let us imagine the small river that once marked the boundary between his provincial command and Italy itself. Its waters flow quietly, insignificant in size, yet in history, they roar loudly as the threshold of civil war. Caesar's decision to cross with his army in 49 BCE would unravel the Republic and set in motion events that neither he nor his rivals could fully control. By the late 50s BCE, Caesar's position was both powerful and precarious. His conquest of Gaul had made him immensely wealthy and popular, but it had also created fear. Many senators, led by Pompey the Great and the conservative faction known as the Optimates, viewed him as a threat to the Republic's balance. They argued that his term of command must end, that he must disband his legions and return to Rome as a private citizen. Caesar, however, knew that without his army, he would stand exposed to charges and prosecutions orchestrated by his enemies. His career, and perhaps his life, would be at risk. The alliance of the First Triumvirate, once so effective, had crumbled. Crassus was dead, leaving a void in the balance of power. Pompey, once Caesar's ally and even his son-in-law, grew closer to the Senate's conservatives. Personal rivalry and political necessity pulled the two men apart. Where once they had shared ambition, now each saw the other as the chief obstacle. The Senate exploited this division, appointing Pompey sole consul in 52 BCE, granting him extraordinary authority. The stage was set for a confrontation not between factions, but between individuals, each commanding vast influence. Amid this rising tension, negotiations flickered faintly. Some sought compromise. Caesar might lay down his command if Pompey did the same, or he might retain only part of his forces until election. Yet distrust poisoned every offer. Senators accused Caesar of plotting monarchy. Caesar accused them of seeking his destruction. The Republic, so carefully balanced by laws and traditions, strained under the weight of ambition and fear. In 49 BCE, the Senate delivered its ultimatum. Caesar must disband his army and return to Rome. To refuse would be rebellion. To accept would be ruin. At this decisive moment, he gathered his legions at the border of his province, beside the Rubicon River in northern Italy. There, according to later tradition, he paused. The decision was momentous, By crossing the river with armed men, he would commit himself to civil war. The phrase attributed to him, alea iacta est, the die is cast, captures both resolve and inevitability. Crossing the Rubicon, Caesar marched south with his troops. Panic seized Rome. Pompey and many senators fled, unwilling to risk immediate battle. Caesar advanced swiftly, presenting himself not as a conqueror, but as the protector of the people against corrupt elites. His strategy was bold: speed, restraint, and persuasion. Many towns welcomed him, others offered little resistance. Within weeks, he held Italy without major conflict. Yet the war was far from over. Pompey regrouped in Greece, where he commanded strong forces and naval supremacy. The civil war that followed stretched across the Mediterranean world. In Spain, Caesar quickly defeated Pompeian forces. In Greece, the two great rivals finally clashed at Pharsalus in 48 BCE. Outnumbered, Caesar relied on discipline and tactical genius, breaking Pompey's lines and securing a decisive victory. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was assassinated upon arrival, a grim end to a storied career. Caesar, arriving shortly after, lamented his rival's fate, for though enemies, Pompey had once been his ally and companion in ambition. Caesar's campaigns did not end with Pompey's death. In Egypt, he became entangled in the dynastic struggle of Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII. Supporting Cleopatra, he secured her throne and formed an alliance that would echo in history. Their union, both political and personal, symbolized Caesar's widening horizons beyond Rome alone. From Egypt, he moved to confront remaining Pompeians in Asia Minor, defeating them sui zela with the famous phrase, Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Later campaigns in Africa and Spain followed, as Caesar pursued rivals until the last resistance collapsed. Throughout these years of civil war, Caesar's leadership remained marked by pragmatism and clemency. Unlike Sulla before him, he sought reconciliation rather than mass executions. He pardoned many opponents, hoping to weave them into his vision of Rome. This policy, while noble in intention, also sowed seeds of future betrayal, for men spared often remained resentful, unwilling to accept his dominance. The crossing of the Rubicon, then, was more than a military maneuver. It was a moment when personal ambition and systemic weakness collided. The Republic's institutions, designed to prevent the rise of kings, could not withstand the pressure of charismatic generals with loyal armies. Caesar's choice revealed the fragility of Roman governance and the inevitability of transformation. By crossing that narrow stream, he crossed into history as the man who ended the Republic's long experiment. As we rest upon this turning point, let us reflect on the quiet irony. A small river, its waters unremarkable, became the threshold of empire. Caesar's march south was not only a march against Pompey, but against centuries of republican tradition. In his footsteps, we hear the echo of destiny, the steady tread of soldiers loyal not to Senate or law, but to their commander. The Republic, proud and enduring, now bent beneath the weight of one man's decision. And so, as the night deepens, we drift with this image, the river flowing calmly, the soldiers crossing in silence, and Caesar riding at their head, resolute. The die is indeed cast, and Rome itself begins to change forever. As the echoes of civil war fade, Caesar stands not merely as a victorious general, but as the master of Rome. The Republic, battered by conflict, looks to him for stability, and in response, he accepts powers unprecedented in scope. In this chapter, we move gently through the years of his dictatorship, observing how he sought to reshape Rome with reforms wide-ranging and ambitious. These measures touched every aspect of Roman life, from governance and economy to the very calendar by which the citizens measured their days. Caesar's dictatorship was brief, yet its imprint lingers across centuries. When Caesar returned to Rome after his victories, he did so cautiously. He knew well the Roman suspicion of kingship. The memory of Tarquinius Superbus, the last king expelled nearly 5 centuries earlier, still haunted the city. To appear as a monarch would provoke resistance, yet to refuse power would squander opportunity. His solution was to accept the position of dictator, a title rooted in republican tradition. Historically, dictators were appointed in times of emergency, granted extraordinary authority for 6 months to resolve crisis. Caesar, however, stretched this office beyond precedent. First appointed for short terms, then for 10 years, and finally for life, he transformed the temporary role into a lasting command. With authority secured, Caesar, turned to reform. He faced a Rome swollen with problems, veterans demanding land, debt crushing citizens, grain supply faltering, and provincial administration rife with corruption. His solutions, though sometimes pragmatic rather than radical, reveal his vision of a more orderly society. One of his earliest actions was the redistribution of land. Veterans of his campaigns, as well as the urban poor, received allotments in colonies across Italy and beyond. This not only rewarded loyalty, but also eased pressure on the crowded capital. Colonization extended Roman influence further, planting communities that would spread Latin culture throughout the Mediterranean. Debt relief followed, carefully balanced to aid struggling citizens without collapsing financial markets. By adjusting interest payments and protecting property, Caesar alleviated hardship while preserving stability. Administrative reforms were equally significant. Provincial governors, long notorious for exploitation, now faced stricter supervision. Tax collection, previously farmed out to private contractors who enriched themselves at the people's expense, was reorganized under more direct state control. These measures curbed corruption and strengthened central authority. For provincials, often marginalized, Caesar's policies brought a measure of fairness, though his motives were as much pragmatic as compassionate. Perhaps his most enduring reform came in the calendar. The old Roman lunar system had fallen into disarray, manipulated by magistrates who adjusted months to suit political needs. Caesar, advised by Egyptian astronomers, instituted the Julian calendar in 46 BCE. By aligning the year with the solar cycle of 365 days and adding a leap year every 4 years, he created a system both accurate and predictable. This calendar, with minor refinements, still governs time today. In reforming the calendar, Caesar gave order not just to politics, but to the rhythm of life itself. He also expanded citizenship, integrating communities beyond Italy into the Roman state. By granting rights to individuals in provinces, he sought to bind distant peoples to Rome's destiny. This inclusiveness, though controversial, anticipated the empire's future, where Roman identity would extend far beyond the city's walls. To Caesar, Rome was not a closed aristocracy, but a widening circle, capable of absorbing and uniting diverse populations. In the cultural sphere, Caesar patronized public works. He planned grand buildings, new forums, temples, and libraries. The Forum of Caesar, though incomplete at his death, symbolized both his ambition and his generosity to the city. Statues and monuments honored his victories, yet he also funded practical improvements, road repairs, harbor expansions, and drainage projects. These works provided employment and beautified Rome, reinforcing his image as benefactor. Still, beneath these reforms lay unease. Many senators resented his dominance, feeling their role diminished. The office of dictator, once temporary, now seemed perpetual. Honors accumulated around him, his portrait on coins, his seat among the gods in festivals, the title Father of the Fatherland. To admirers, these were signs of gratitude. To critics, they smacked of monarchy. Whispers of kingship circulated, stirring fear in a city proud of its republican heritage. Caesar himself seemed aware of this tension. On one occasion, when offered a crown by his ally Mark Antony during public games, he refused. Yet the gesture raised questions. Was the refusal sincere or a performance to test opinion? The ambiguity deepened suspicion. His clemency toward enemies, while admirable, also left him surrounded by men who had once opposed him and might do so again. The very mercy that distinguished him from Sulla became a quiet vulnerability. As we reflect on Caesar's dictatorship, we see a leader both visionary and practical. He addressed real problems, leaving behind structures that endured. Yet he also concentrated authority in himself, unsettling those who cherished the republic's balance. His reforms, though beneficial, became inseparable from his personal dominance. For the Senate, accustomed to shared power, this was intolerable. The years of his rule, then, are both achievement and prelude. The calendar ticks forward with new precision. Fields are settled by veterans, laws are codified, and Rome gleams with new projects. Yet beneath the calm surface, daggers are being sharpened. The Republic, unwilling to accept permanence in dictatorship, prepares to strike back. Caesar, walking through the forum he built, might not yet hear the whispers behind him. But history, steady and relentless, moves toward its fateful Ides of March. And so, as we drift at the close of this chapter, we rest with the image of a city both grateful and uneasy. Rome breathes in the order of reforms, yet exhales suspicion with every rumor of monarchy. The man who gave the world a new calendar and new stability now walks upon a narrow ridge where one misstep may topple greatness into tragedy. The shadow of conspiracy lengthens as Caesar's power grows. In this chapter, we walk slowly into the fateful spring of 44 BCE, when ambition, reform, and suspicion converge in one of history's most famous assassinations. The Ides of March becomes not merely a date, but a symbol of the fragile balance between trust and betrayal, between honor and fear. As we drift into this moment, we picture Rome in late winter, the Forum alive with chatter, senators wrapped in togas crossing the marble steps, and beneath the surface, unease building like a hidden current. By 44 BCE, Caesar had reached the pinnacle of authority. He was dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, a title that confirmed both his dominance and the Senate's discomfort. Honors surrounded him, statues, festivals, his image on coins. He planned campaigns against Parthia, dreaming of eastern conquests that would rival Alexander the Great. Yet his power, however extraordinary, was not universally admired. Many senators, especially among the Optimates, feared the Republic was slipping into monarchy under a single man. The conspiracy that formed against him drew from these anxieties. Its leaders included men of influence and reputation. Marcus Junius Brutus, respected for integrity and linked by ancestry to the early expellers of kings. Gaius Cassius Longinus, a sharp-minded general. And Decimus Brutus, once a trusted ally of Caesar himself. What bound them together was not poverty or exclusion, but principle, or at least the appearance of it. They convinced themselves that by killing Caesar, they would restore liberty to Rome. Yet woven into their motives were rivalry, envy, and the fear of being eclipsed. Caesar, for his part, carried on with confidence. He trusted in his clemency, believing that forgiveness had transformed enemies into supporters. His daily life showed little fear. He walked freely in the Forum, attended the Senate, and dismissed warnings. Ancient sources tell of omens, dreams of his wife Calpurnia, visions of blood at the Capitol, prophecies whispered by soothsayers. On the morning of March 15th, Calpurnia begged him to stay home, but Decimus Brutus persuaded him to attend the Senate meeting, arguing that absence would appear as weakness. The Senate convened in the Theater of Pompey, a building rich with irony. It had been constructed by Caesar's former ally and later rival, Pompey the Great. Beneath its grand portico and within its curia, senators gathered with daggers concealed. When Caesar entered, he was greeted with deference, then surrounded. The conspirators struck swiftly. Accounts differ on the number of wounds, but ancient writers record more than 20. According to tradition, when Caesar saw Brutus among his attackers, he uttered the words, "Et tu, Brute?" You too, Brutus? Whether spoken or imagined, the phrase captured the sting of betrayal. Struck down, Caesar collapsed at the base of Pompey's statue, his blood staining the floor of the theater. In that moment, the senators believed they had saved the Republic. They raised their daggers, proclaiming freedom. But outside the chamber, the city did not rejoice. The people, shocked and uncertain, did not rally to the assassins. Many had benefited from Caesar's reforms. Others admired his generosity. Instead of celebration, confusion spread. The liberators had ended a life but not secured a future. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. The conspirators fled the theater, unsure of their next step. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal ally and co-consul, seized the moment, calming the crowds and ensuring Caesar's funeral would become a stage for persuasion. At the funeral, Antony read Caesar's will, which left generous gifts to the people of Rome, and he displayed Caesar's body, pierced with wounds. The crowd, moved to anger and grief, turned against the conspirators, driving them from the city. What the assassins had hoped would be a return to liberty became the prelude to further civil war. The Ides of March thus became a hinge in history. It revealed the depth of fear the Senate felt toward concentrated power, yet it also revealed the strength of Caesar's bond with the people. The conspirators killed the man, but not the forces he represented. Their act, intended to restore the Republic, instead accelerated its demise. Into the vacuum stepped not freedom, but new struggles for supremacy. Antony, Octavian, and others vying to inherit Caesar's mantle. As we pause upon this moment, we reflect on its layers. The assassination is at once a political act, a personal betrayal, and a symbolic event etched into collective memory. The dagger strokes echo through literature, art, and history, reminding us of the fragility of governance when fear and ambition collide. Yet beneath the drama lies a quieter truth. Rome itself had changed, and no single act could turn back its course. As night deepens, let us rest with this image, the Senate chamber, once the heart of Republican deliberation, silent now except for whispers of fate. Caesar lies at the base of Pompey's statue, his story entering legend. Outside, the people stir, uncertain, restless, awaiting what comes next. The Republic trembles and history turns its page. The death of Julius Caesar leaves Rome in turmoil. His fall, intended to restore the Republic, instead creates a vacuum that draws ambitious men into conflict. In this chapter, we follow the years after the Ides of March, tracing how power passes from Caesar's hands into those of his heir and allies, and how the Republic finally dissolves into empire. It is a story of shifting alliances, battles fought across continents, and a city struggling to define its future. When Caesar's assassins fled the Senate House, they imagined themselves saviors. They believed the people would welcome the return of liberty. Instead, the opposite occurred. The Roman populace mourned Caesar deeply, not only for his leadership, but for the benefits they had received from him. At his funeral, Mark Antony, Caesar's ally and co-consul, transformed grief into anger. In a speech both calculated and passionate, he displayed Caesar's wounds and read his will, which granted money and land to ordinary Romans. The crowd erupted in fury, turning against the conspirators, who escaped the city in fear. Antony seemed at first the natural successor. A skilled soldier and orator, he controlled the loyalty of many of Caesar's veterans. Yet Caesar had left behind a hidden legacy. His will named Gaius Octavius, his grandnephew, as adopted son and heir. Octavian, only 18 at the time, suddenly carried Caesar's name, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, and with it a claim to his authority. Many underestimated him, dismissing him as too young, too untested. But Octavian would prove shrewd beyond his years, combining patience, calculation, and ambition in equal measure. In the months that followed, Rome became a stage of shifting power. Antony tried to assert dominance, but Octavian moved swiftly, gaining the support of Caesar's veterans by appealing to their loyalty to the Julian name. The Senate, wary of Antony's strength, saw in Octavian a counterbalance. An uneasy triangle of rivalry took shape: Antony, Octavian, and the Senate, each maneuvering for advantage. Amid this uncertainty, Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, gathered forces in the eastern provinces, preparing to challenge the Caesarian faction. Rome teetered on the edge of renewed civil war. To avoid immediate collapse, Antony, Octavian, and Marcus Lepidus, another of Caesar's allies, formed a new alliance in 43 BCE, the Second Triumvirate. Unlike the informal arrangement of Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, this alliance carried legal authority, granting the three men nearly absolute power to restore order. Their methods were harsh. Proscriptions, lists of enemies condemned to death, were issued, and many senators and equestrians lost their lives or property. Among the victims was Cicero, the great orator, whose opposition to Antony sealed his fate. With their grip secured in Rome, the triumvirs turned to confront the assassins abroad. In 42 BCE, the forces of Brutus and Cassius met those of Antony and Octavian at the twin battles of Philippi in Macedonia. The conflict was fierce, but the conspirators were ultimately defeated. Both Brutus and Cassius took their own lives. With their deaths, the hope of restoring the Republic ended. The memory of liberty lingered in rhetoric, but in reality, power now belonged to men who ruled not as servants of the state, but as masters of it. Yet unity among the triumvirs was fragile. Lepidus soon faded from prominence, leaving Antony and Octavian as rivals. Antony allied himself with Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, cementing both political and romantic ties. Their partnership alarmed many in Rome, who feared Eastern influence and saw Antony drifting away from Roman tradition. Octavian, skillful in propaganda, presented himself as defender of Roman values, contrasting his own moderation with Antony's supposed decadence. The rivalry escalated until open war broke out. In 31 BCE, the forces of Antony and Cleopatra faced those of Octavian at Actium, a naval battle off the coast of Greece. Octavian's fleet, commanded by his brilliant admiral Agrippa, triumphed. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where, pursued by Octavian, they took their own lives. With their deaths, Octavian stood alone as master of Rome. In 27 BCE, Octavian took the title Augustus, inaugurating the Roman Empire. Though he preserved the outward forms of republican institutions, senate, assemblies, magistracies, real power lay with him. The republic, already weakened by decades of conflict, had finally given way to imperial rule. Caesar's heir had fulfilled what his adoptive father began, transforming Rome into an empire that would endure for centuries. For Caesar himself, the years after his death reveal the paradox of his legacy. He had sought to reform the republic, to centralize authority without discarding its forms. His assassination was meant to prevent monarchy, yet it hastened its arrival. Octavian, shaped by Caesar's example, built an even stronger system of one-man rule. In this sense, Caesar's influence stretched beyond his lifetime, shaping not only the events of his age, but the very structure of Rome's future. As we pause at this juncture, we see Rome transformed. The marble streets that once echoed with debates of senators now resound with the authority of an emperor. The republic, proud and ancient, lies behind. The empire, vast and enduring, lies ahead. The figure of Julius Caesar lingers like a shadow, his name carried forward by his heir, his memory woven into Rome's identity. And so, as the night deepens, we rest with this image, the torchlit forum, once filled with clashing voices, now quieter under imperial order. Caesar is gone, yet his presence endures in the very shape of the world that follows him. His life, his death, and his legacy bind together the old republic and the new empire, carrying Rome forward into centuries of greatness. The story of Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire does not end with his death or even with the rise of Augustus. His legacy stretches across centuries, influencing politics, culture, and thought in ways that reach us even now. To bring our journey to its close, we drift gently through the echoes of Caesar's life and the enduring weight of Rome itself. We consider how Caesar's reforms, ambitions, and image shaped not only the empire that followed, but also the broader history of the world. When Octavian became Augustus, he consciously tied his authority to the memory of his adoptive father. The name Caesar itself became a title, eventually synonymous with emperor. Later rulers across cultures, Kaisers in Germany, czars in Russia, borrowed from it, testifying to the lasting resonance of Julius Caesar's persona. Though the man fell on the Ides of March, his name became immortal, a symbol of supreme power. The empire Augustus forged stood on foundations laid by Caesar. The centralization of authority, the extension of citizenship, the use of colonies to spread Roman culture, all were ideas Caesar had advanced. His calendar, reformed with Egyptian precision, ordered not only Roman time, but, eventually, the time of the Western world. Even today, the months we mark, July in particular, bear his name, a reminder of how deeply his reforms reached into daily life. Culturally, Caesar's image endured in literature and memory. His own writings, especially the Gallic War, influenced generations of readers with their clarity and precision. They shaped the Latin style admired in schools for centuries. Later historians, poets, and playwrights wove his story into their works, from Suetonius to Shakespeare. The figure of Caesar became a canvas upon which debates about power, loyalty, and betrayal were painted. Was he a tyrant who destroyed the republic, or a visionary who sought to reform it? The question echoes still, unresolved, stimulating reflection on the nature of authority. For the Roman Empire, Caesar's legacy was both inspiration and caution. Emperors invoked his name to legitimize themselves, but they also remembered his fate, the daggers of the Senate reminding them of the dangers of appearing too kingly. Augustus was careful to mask his rule in republican forms, mindful of the resentment Caesar's honors had provoked. In this way, Caesar's life and death served as both model and warning for those who followed. Beyond politics, Caesar symbolized the possibilities and perils of ambition. His rise from a relatively modest patrician background to supreme power embodied the Roman virtues of courage, discipline, and eloquence. Yet his assassination revealed the fragility of those achievements when they threatened entrenched traditions. In him, the grandeur and contradictions of Rome converged. Military genius and political reformer, beloved leader and feared autocrat. His legacy is not a simple tale of hero or villain, but a mirror reflecting the complexity of human striving. Rome itself, under the empire, blossomed into new grandeur. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, brought stability, allowing art, architecture, and trade to flourish. Roads stretched across Europe, Aqueducts carried water into cities, and amphitheaters hosted spectacles that united communities. The empire spread Latin language and Roman law across vast regions, planting seeds that would grow into European civilization. Behind this achievement lay Caesar's decisive step, his reshaping of the Republic into a form that made empire possible. In time, Rome itself would fall, its empire dissolving under pressure from within and without. Yet the memory of Caesar endured, carried in manuscripts preserved by scholars, revived in the Renaissance, and echoed in the political thought of modern nations. Leaders studied him, some admiring his decisiveness, others warning against his concentration of power. His story became a touchstone for debates about liberty, governance, and the dangers of ambition. As we bring our long journey to its close, let us imagine the quiet after the storm. The Forum, where Caesar once walked, now lies in ruins, visited by travelers who marvel at fallen columns. Yet in those ruins, his presence lingers. The calendar turns, the language of Rome persists in the Romance tongues, the concept of empire shapes human imagination, and Julius Caesar's name, spoken across millennia, carries with it both caution and inspiration. We end not with the clash of swords or the cry of betrayal, but with reflection. The story of Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire is, at its heart, the story of human ambition and the structures we build to contain it. It is a story of courage and consequence, of reforms that last and decisions that ripple outward. It reminds us that power, however dazzling, is fragile, and that legacies once shaped can outlive their makers in ways they never imagined. As the night settles, hold this image, the river Tiber flowing softly beneath the Roman sky, carrying with it memories of kings, senators, soldiers, and emperors. Upon its banks once stood Julius Caesar, shaping a world that continues to shape us. His life and his Rome now drift into the background, like distant voices fading into quiet. And in that quiet, knowledge remains, waiting gently in the mind, carried forward in dreams.